Today we are going to be building a triple surround 1080p gaming setup on a strict budget. Now the star of today's show is the RX 6600 used, which we got for a little under $100 US on the used market. And then we've also got here a Ryzen 5 1600, which we got for a bargain price as well. Now we've also got some used DDR4 memory, the cooler that came with this CPU, and we've got a new keyboard and mouse, as well as a new case and power supply and SSD. I find these items are actually very hard to pick up off the used market, especially reliably. However, we still need a motherboard and monitors, and I'm actually in luck because another used parts enthusiast here where I live on the Gold Coast actually has a trade where they want to trade me some of these keyboards for some monitors and a motherboard. So we are going to go price this thing up right now and then come back with the total package and see what we can start building this combo for, and if we come into any problems.
If you want to get yourself a cheap, legit Windows 10 Pro key license, then today's video sponsor SCD Keys has you covered. For as little as $14, when you use that coupon code BFTYC, you can get Windows activated right now. Links in the description below.
And now we just got back from the used parts enthusiast, and we ended up picking and getting more than I even bargained for. I initially came in thinking I would just get 3 banger monitors, but he ended up having these bezel-less designed Dell U2417Hs, but they didn't have any stands. However, I ended up trading him 13 of these RGB keyboard and mouse combos for in total 10 monitors, some with stands and some without stands, and then a heap of cables because I need power cables and DisplayPort and HDMI cables, for example, and also a box of banged up motherboards where one of them has a CPU, the i7-5930K. So these keyboards, they ended up costing me 15 Aussie dollars a piece, and that's about 10 USD. And because we're both in the game of buying and selling used parts, we did each other cost price on our deals. So I ended up getting something that I really needed. He ended up getting something that he really needed, and we're both really happy. But I also ended up getting this off my friend too, because this is a B350, which was an X mining motherboard. Now, you might be thinking, well, Brian, it's an X mining motherboard. Surely it's not going to work for gaming. But once we take out this CPU, because I didn't even know what's in there, pretty sure it'd just be some like maybe dual core piece of crap. And we add some RAM in, put the Ryzen 5 1600 in, and add a graphics card, it should work just like any ordinary B350 motherboard. And since the Ryzen 5 1600 isn't too power hungry, it should make for a fine combo. However, one thing I've got to do right now is tally up how much all these parts are costing me so far, because you guys are probably curious as well what our initial tally has come out to before we start building, because we may come into some problems that may cost us a bit of extra money. But also I've got to know if these these stands will fit flush with the monitors, and if they don't, I'll have to drill some holes and then possibly screw and or silicon the monitors to these stands. So fingers crossed, let's see if these monitors fit, and if they do, we can get onto the build. So we just fitted these monitors straight onto these stands, and I'm telling you guys, this never happens. Whenever I just pick up random stands on used parts hunts or off Gumtree listings, and in this case, I got these 3 stands right here off a Gumtree listing for 20 Aussie dollars, which would be about 15 US dollars. Now, I always pick up monitor stands that people are selling for cheap. The main reason being is that I always, sooner or later, come into monitors without stands, and they go extremely cheap, just like a lot of the monitors that we swap for these keyboards here. So you can get a lot of value out of picking up monitor stands that people are just throwing out for really cheap because they want to use a custom stand that fits 3 monitors on. For me, I just look to mount the monitor and have it sitting on the desk. And so when I bought these 3 stands over a week ago, I did not think they would be this convenient and come out this good, where even though the middle one here is different, they all just fit flush. I don't have to drill any holes. They're all stuck on really well. And so if you guys have ever just tried random stands with random monitors, even though they're the same brand, a lot of the times they just won't fit. So I'm really lucky that all 3 of these fit just flush. And this middle one here, although it's different, it still fit fine to these other 2, but that's not a problem for me because the middle monitor is the one that you're doing the main gaming on, and these 2 monitors have the stretch, and so it's still kind of symmetrical, I guess. So now we're on to cleaning the monitor. Now for this, you can do it either 2 ways. You can use multi-purpose spray to spray it down and then just wipe it off, or you can use alcohol wipes. Now I do not recommend using alcohol wipes in combination with multi-purpose spray because if you do use them together, it just leaves this like mush residue on the monitor. So only use either one, don't use them together. So in this case, I actually prefer on monitors just to use the wipes, and these are just, they're non-alcohol, these ones. I probably would be careful also using alcohol wipes on monitors. Now these ones are biodegradable. I don't think they have any alcohol in them, but if you do use alcohol wipes, I'd recommend just quickly wiping off the alcohol off the main screen very quickly so it's dry if you do use it. But these ones here are perfectly fine, and I'm just really going to go through quickly now and clean up all 3 of these monitors and make them look like they're brand new, or at least close to brand new.
Watch my life pass me by, never knowing where I belong in a web of love and lies as you string me along. And I can't breathe, I can't see, I'm losing sight of everything. I feel the walls closing in, I'm falling apart.
So we've now just finished cleaning those monitors. They are now chilling, although they're not watching any Netflix because unfortunately there's no power hooked up to them, but maybe later. And we got this motherboard right here. This is a B350. We've got to clean this down because it is pretty dirty, and also this CPU cooler. These are the last dirty parts here to clean down because our graphics card was actually cleaned up in a previous video. I've already taken the cooler apart, I've cleaned it all up and put some new thermal paste on as well as new memory pads. So that's all done. The memory, that is really clean already on its own, but we might as well just put some multi-purpose spray on it anyway since we're doing the rest of this with multi-purpose spray. And those new parts, they don't need any cleaning, but I'll spray them down a little bit later. So let's use this dirty wipes that we just used on the monitors to get really all the rough dirt off, then we'll spray it down. And there it is, fellas. I was telling you what was underneath that cooler wasn't going to be any good, and it isn't any good. And that's because this cooler is designed for those cheaper CPUs. So we can just really put this CPU and this cooler aside for now and then get on with the cleaning. And now it's time to play everybody's favorite game, and this one is called Make Sure You Test All Your Parts Before You Put Them in a Build, because if there's something faulty, then you'll know before you install the build, and you won't have to waste time and take it out later, and it could add to problems that are easily diagnosable if it's in this current state. I know that's a lengthy title for the game you need to play, but trust me, it's a great game, and it always is going to, in the end, save you a lot of time and win out. Even though we've got used parts here, which is the main reason I'm doing it, even if you have new parts, I like to do this as well, because sometimes you can come into a faulty DDR4 stick of memory, a faulty motherboard, or a faulty power supply. Faulty GPUs and CPUs are usually very rare, brand new, but they can also happen time to time. However, what we got right here is a motherboard. It's all working, everything's there. We're all good to go, and it's time to finally build this PC up. Yahoo! And we are now finished with our setup. The monitors are all working with iFinity installed, which makes the resolution, instead of 1080p, it's 1080 by 5760, and it acts as essentially one monitor. And even on top of that, there's even better news, where I managed to overclock these panels from 60 Hertz to 75 Hertz. So we've got a bit of a bump up there in refresh rate on these panels. So if you've got one of these older Dell panels, I think this was made in 2016, you can overclock them to 75 Hertz. Though keep in mind you will void your warranty, but since it's like 5 or 6 years old, the warranty's probably run out anyway. Also, when it came to the GPU, we upped the memory speeds and slightly tuned that just for lower voltages, so we use less power and get more performance by what is known as undervolting. Of course, with undervolting, you can do this however you like, and you get great results. Then we also tuned the DDR4 memory. Although it was very limited in this BIOS, we did manage to get a sneaky 2933 megahertz stable, and that enabled us to just really get the most out of this 2400 megahertz DDR4 memory without any XMP profiles. And I did try to bump it just a little bit more than 2933 megahertz. However, even with 1 megahertz on the base clock, essentially trying to get 1 megahertz or 1.3%, I think it was, performance out of this memory and CPU, it just completely crashed. And so we pretty much reached the limit with the memory on this CPU here. And unfortunately, when it came to the CPU tuning itself, there was no options on this B350 mining motherboard, but I am certainly not complaining, since we got this whole setup for in total $340 US, which is, when I look at this, I'm just blown away. I mean, providing we get into the games and everything works fine, so far I am extremely impressed, where this is probably going to be one of the best feats I have done here on the channel in just making something that's not only budget, but also extremely desirable. Even people right now with fancy 4K monitors are probably thinking, damn Brian, you got something real going on here. And for $340 US, I mean, man, this is certainly already looking to be an absolute victory, though it is pretty late right now. It's about 10 p.m. and so I'm actually gonna crash out, and in the morning, I'm going to play some games, because I do not want to play games while I'm tired. I'm literally just going to be cannon fodder for the other team, and I don't want to be that. I actually want to try and enjoy myself and play some games properly. So we're going to wake up in the morning, then come back and get some FPS numbers.
Something's coming, but nobody knows. Angels rage, they come down from the sky to face these broken wings and show me how to
Now that we've finished playing the triple monitor setup in games at 1080p, I was really impressed by what this system could do. Now, the first thing I got asked when I posted this build to Twitter was, isn't the Ryzen 5 1600 going to bottleneck the RX 6600? And perhaps at 1080p on a single monitor, it may, but since we're using 3 monitors here, there's a lot more strain now being placed on the graphics card. And so what I found with all the titles that I was playing here today, the GPU was pretty much near maximum usage with that percentage on the statistics overlay. And so that shows us that the graphics card is essentially being utilized near 100%, which is exactly what we want when we are PC gaming with a mid-range or even a high-end graphics card. Otherwise, we're just leaving performance on the table. And in this case, we had 3 different titles, all latest releases in 2022, where depending on the settings, we were getting either around a 60 FPS experience like Spiderman. That was probably the worst case scenario where we dropped it to low settings, but it was still smooth and really enjoyable. Then we moved over to Warzone and we had a blend of high and medium settings, and we got over 70 average FPS, which was extremely playable. And then the last title, F1 2022, we had it on the high preset and we got, again, just over 70 average FPS. So really impressed with the numbers this system was pulling out. And also going back to a triple surround setup was just actually a lot of fun. It's something you really don't get out of even a 32:9, for instance. Even though technically you get, I think it is a 2.32 or 2.34, roughly around there, resolution, because the outer 2 monitors actually start to stretch. So I believe they're a 66% true resolution scale compared to the main monitor. So I believe the best experience for this is whether you're either playing a first person or a third person shooter, driver, or RPG. Where if we were to play Dota 2, for example, I know from experience it can be a really weird experience on mobile, but besides that, if you're on MMORPGs, this can probably be one of the best experiences you can get. And then we've got the price tag, which for $340 US, I seriously can't believe we put this thing together and it just ran this smoothly. The noise is really well controlled, the temperatures as well, with the GPU that's remaining under 70 degrees at all times, and the CPU's hovering a little bit over 50 degrees. I would have liked to extract a little bit more performance out of the CPU, but unfortunately the BIOS on this mining motherboard wasn't giving me really any options. But I was still grateful that I was able to overclock the memory, which is really important not just on any CPU, but in particular a Ryzen 1st generation CPU, which is really memory starved. So the higher the memory speeds on this CPU, the better. And also as well, you got to be careful with Ryzen 1st gen because the IMC is actually pretty weak. So I was actually really impressed to get 2933 out of not just the budget memory, but also the CPU with virtually no hiccups. The last thing to talk about here is simply the power of used price performance. Don't be afraid to get some used monitors, especially if you know they're working, and also like we did here, get some stands and then just try and attach them, whether they fit from the get-go or you've got to drill some holes in the stands themselves and bolt them down. I find it's not an issue and you're just going to get tremendous value for money out of used monitors. Then we go into our actual main PC build itself, and we got the Ryzen 5 1600. That only costs a little over $40 US, and then the GPU was under $100, and that really made this whole build come together. So it's never been a better time, in my opinion, to go check out what's on the used market and see if you can get a bargain. I'll put some links in the description below for you guys of the parts we used here today. However, I did get all these deals locally. Local deals are always going to be better than eBay or your local Facebook marketplace or OfferUp or things like that, as there's fees on those platforms, and of course there's postage costs. As opposed to getting local, you can just get a bargain, not only for the fact that you're not incurring those fees, but also a lot of people just want to sell things quickly locally, so they'll let it go even at lower prices than they would otherwise want. Also, we did use some new parts here, and that was the case as well as the SSD and the power supply. So I find with these three components, they don't come up a whole lot on the used market, especially for good prices. And so buying these components new, I always check out what the prices are used, of course, but if they're close to new prices on these three components, then I usually just go with new to save me not just some time cleaning, but also the hassles, especially in the case of a power supply and SSD, of running into any issues. Anyhow, guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's budget surround setup, all AMD Ryzen and also RX Radeon gaming build. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button, and also let us know in the comments section below, do you like this setup? Would there be some things you would change personally? For me, I just really think this came together in the end, and I was just actually blown back when I checked the final price tally of how good value you can get right now. It's an extremely good time to get into PC gaming. And with that said, that is a wrap. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from George86 Rodriguez. And they asked, does the RX 6600M have the same driver support as the desktop version? And we checked out the RX 6600M version, which is a very inexpensive GPU going on AliExpress. I'll put the link to a video we did on it up here. And in that video, we used the regular AMD RX 6600 drivers, and it installed absolutely fine. So at least from what I've used and experienced, it uses the same driver set as the RX 6600. And so for pretty much all intents and purposes, that card is an RX 6600. So I hope AMD don't do anything in the future to nerf it, as it really is a price performance king for new graphics cards. Anyway, hope that answers that question, and I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.